Hi there, welcome back. Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a very first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Delighted to say, joining us tonight, we have Miguel Delaney, chief football writer for The Independent, and Jason Burt as well, chief football correspondent for the Daily Telegraph. Welcome to you both. Let's very quickly then run through the back pages. Well, the Times has the Premier League clubs to be patient with the new VAR system for the upcoming season. Jason's paper, The Telegraph, reports that managers have vetoed an idea to allow refs to explain the nature of their decision to fans in the stadium for fear of slowing the game down. They also picture Kylian Mbappe as he scored and won a trophy on his Real Madrid debut. The Express has Chelsea moving for Victor Osimhen, with Romelu Lukaku heading to Napoli as part of that deal. They also report that the Saudi League has made Ivan Toney a huge offer. Well, the Staff also has that story on Ivan Toney, but they lead with Arne Slot, who is tipped to bring calm to Liverpool's style of play after what is described as the chaos of the Jurgen Klopp era. And you can see there as well, they also cover Bruno Fernandes's new deal at Manchester United. Right. Well, a very warm welcome to both of you, and brilliant to have you on the show this evening. I want to start with a story that is in the Times and in the Daily Telegraph. I think you're both really well placed to talk about this one. The Times, the headline there, Top Flight tells clubs be patient with VAR. The Times saying that the Premier League has asked its clubs and players to be mindful of criticising referees and to show them patience this season. Similar story in the Daily Telegraph as well, talking about VAR as well. Their headline, this an exclusive in the Telegraph, saying that managers veto VAR innovation. Premier League managers told Howard Webb in a private meeting last month they didn't want this new season innovation of referees announcing VAR decisions live on mic to crowds in stadiums, and the proposal now has been dropped. Jason, talk us through that, because you've been involved, but both of you have been involved in some of these meetings.
Yeah, the Premier League have been doing a round of briefings, obviously with various media, broadcasters and written media and radio and so on, explaining basically how they're going to tinker with VAR this season and hopefully make it more effective, and that continual process of improving it. And clearly it is improving, and we're talking about various innovations coming along later in the season, such as semi-automated offside, which I'm not quite sure why it's not starting now. I think they want to get the technology right, but it seemed to be perfectly fine at the Euros, but that's another case. But clearly what struck me today was almost the message of, well, you know, we're doing fine, leave us alone, don't criticise us, let us get on with it. And I think that's a little bit silly, to be honest with you, of the Premier League. I think there's been an awful lot of criticism of VAR, and rightly so. And I think, you know, what I think happens in these situations a little bit is we forget what football is for, and we forget who football is for. And it's for the fans, and the fans are the ones who are obviously paying their money. The fans are the ones who want to watch football and enjoy the football and be immersed in that experience. And that is happening. But I think at times the Premier League almost wants this sort of glossy interpretation of football whereby they're getting everything right and it's wrong to criticise them. And at the same time, we've got the managers who have been arch critics of VAR and use it as an excuse to sort of mask their own sometimes inefficiencies and poor performances and so on and so forth, being told firstly to stop criticising VAR, which is a little bit, as I say, naive. And secondly, they now are saying, well, we don't want decisions explained by the referees on field in the stadium. Now, their argument is it's going to slow down the whole process. Well, I mean, there is also that argument about why isn't the process quicker anyway? And one of the issues that was raised with the Premier League today was whether or not they thought about putting a sort of a time bar on if you can't make a decision within a certain time frame, then obviously you move on. And again, they didn't want to do that. And I don't quite know why, but they don't want to do that. They obviously want to get it right, fair enough. But obviously one of the biggest issues, probably the biggest issue of all with VAR, is the time it's taking, which obviously the managers have now jumped onto. But I think everyone is sort of forgetting that actually this is about the fans and making sure the fans are being served properly. And obviously, again, one of the things that came out today was a survey from the Premier League saying that 4 out of 5 fans are in favour of VAR, which within minutes was sort of questioned by the Football Supporters Association, who said, well, we're not quite sure which fans you've been talking to. So I'm not sure it was a massively successful day for the Premier League, if I'm perfectly honest. And obviously we are all looking forward to the new season, but I think there are still issues to be addressed. And I think they need to speed up things in the way they do stuff, to speed up things in the way it happens on the pitch.
Yeah. Miguel, what's your take on it? Because obviously we're talking there very much about those VAR decisions not being put out into the stadium. That's why Jason's sort of focusing on, this not being about the fans then if you're not doing that. But they have said, the Premier League, that in stadium they'll put some more on-screen messaging there. They'll put, some more replays as well where they're relevant, and then not to do with the stadium, but they'll put more info out on social media.
Oh, yeah, that was one of the striking things about from that story in Jason's paper Telegraph about managers vetoing that, especially given the messaging from the Premier League all week, and really since June and this initial meeting where the club has voted to keep VAR after a Wolves proposal. They have been intent on improving it, but also to improve transparency. And this, I suppose, veto by the managers is one thing that works against that. And just picking up on one point Jason made there as well, about kind of the general vibe of the Premier League and the messaging sent today. I mean, also this issue of speed and maybe also a little bit of a sense of obstinacy that Jason picked up on. You could also apply that to the Premier League on regulatory issues right now, especially given how much has come up about the City case and all sorts of other off-field issues that were another theme of today that we'll get onto. But yeah, obviously VAR, because this is the game as it's played in the pitch, has been dominant. On one side, I think they are taking some decent steps. They've got a decent steps to improve transparency. They've got this 6-point plan. But equally, when a lot of us were in kind of these meetings today, one of the lines that immediately jumped out to all of us was basically, this message to managers and clubs: criticism of VAR damages the competition. Because, I mean, well, you could say the ultimate improvement in the competition's image that way, just making sure VAR works correctly.
Yeah. Just want to actually stick with the, I suppose, governance and football and head to the I, because the headline here, Richard Masters, it is our job to make sure clubs play by the rules. This is a story by Sam Cunningham and Jason talking about the Premier League chief executive insisting it is great that clubs are finding angles to compete provided they don't breach the rules. And I mean, if you look at specifically at Chelsea, since Todd Boehly's come in, they've signed players on these ridiculously, long contracts, haven't they? Allowed to kind of, amortise these fees for up to long periods of time.
Yeah, no, I need to read the full text of that story, because I think those might be quotes that Richard Masters comes to regret personally. I mean, it's not about finding loopholes to play the system, to game the system. It's about the system and whether it's right in the first place. And I've got my very strong issues with PSR and profit and sustainability rules and the way they're framed. I think the idea behind them is very sound. Obviously, we want our clubs to be run on financial stable ground, but actually the way they've gone about it, the way it's being implemented at the moment, isn't right. I mean, it's just not right. We shouldn't be having players like Conor Gallagher and Trevor Chalobah being forced out of Chelsea because they're homegrown players and they're pure profit sales and all that can be banked and so on and so forth. Okay, Chelsea are putting players on longer term contracts. That's their prerogative. There's an argument for and against that, and that's a slightly separate issue. But I think there is real concern over how clubs are getting around some of these PSR rules. We obviously saw that flurry of transfers at the end of June before the deadline then of obviously submitting their latest accounts, and some of those quite eyebrow-raising transfer fees that were paid for players who hadn't played very many Premier League games between clubs who were in difficult situations. And this isn't really what the system should be doing. And at the same time, we're obviously seeing ticket prices going back up this season, with clubs arguing that they need to raise their revenues to make sure they comply with the PSR rules, and that they are bringing in the right amount of money into their coffers. And again, to my mind, this isn't what should be happening in the Premier League. We shouldn't be looking at the richest league in the world with its massive, huge TV contracts, actually sort of asking for more money from the fans when the fans are paying so much money in the first place, and obviously the merchandising and ticketing and so on. And I'm really concerned actually about the whole direction of the Premier League at the moment, and whether or not people need to step back a little bit and think about what actually they're trying to do here and what they're trying to achieve with this league. And obviously, it's just to maintain its primacy as the best league in the world. Absolutely right, the most competitive league. But I think at times there are things that are happening at the moment as we head into this new season, which are causing me in particular as a football writer an awful lot of concern. And I think that I need to read those quotes closely, but I think he might come to regret the way he's framed that.
Yeah, Miguel, agree with that Richard Masters might regret those comments?
Yeah, I was sat there as Richard was saying them. I was surprised at maybe the phrasing he used, which was basically clubs try to find an angle. Now, it was directly put to him over whether that could be interpreted as trying to find, I suppose, or trying to exploit loopholes in the rules. Now, he did reject that and talk about really how it's in the spirit of competition. He did insist that there is a kind of a spirit of togetherness in the Premier League, but it's togetherness, I suppose, where they're trying to beat each other on the pitch. Now, I suppose, given the recent history and what we're talking about in terms of so many of these regulatory issues that are suddenly coming up, and how so much of modern football in the modern Premier League has the potential to be played out among lawyers, really, as much as players, people might question that stance. But it does show, maybe it points to what Jason's saying there about the direction. And these are big questions for the Premier League in that sense. And I think I completely agree. It does need to assess where it's going next.
Yeah, interesting times. Jason, I want to mention a player that you touched on a minute ago, Conor Gallagher, when we were talking about Chelsea. Head to your paper, the Daily Telegraph. This is a piece by Matt Law. The headline there, you can see it, Simeone still desperate to sign Gallagher. I mean, Jason, this is turning into some saga, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Obviously, we had Conor Gallagher flying out to Madrid. We even had Atletico Madrid posting social media pictures of him on the pitch at the Wanda Metropolitano with negotiations going on with Chelsea. And now the players had to return to Chelsea because they couldn't strike the deal. And we know he's surplus to requirements. They've offered him, Chelsea obviously arguing they've offered him a new contract, but they're certainly not offering him a 9-year contract the way they have with Cole Palmer. And again, that's their prerogative. But this is a player who's been with them since he was 8 years old. He's been a model professional at Chelsea. I would argue he was probably their second best player last season after Cole Palmer. And they've been trying to sell him for the last couple of years. And why have they been trying to sell him? It's not because he's not a good player. Now, obviously, Chelsea are arguing he doesn't fit into Enzo Maresca's system and the way he wants to play. I would question that as well. I really would. I'm surprised that they're putting that out there. It's really, let's look at it very bluntly. They're looking at pure profit that they can bank for him the way they can with Trevor Chalobah, who again is another very, very good young Chelsea player. Again, arguably one of their better players last season when he played. Now he's also been basically ostracised from the club, and he's not going to be part of the plans either. I think this is really uncomfortable. We should be in a situation where we're celebrating academy players being brought through. The Premier League has made a big thing about their academies and their players they've developed, and those players going into the England squad, and fantastic, and isn't this great? Now, all of that is good, and again, Chelsea have, as other clubs, have the right to trade their players, but it's the way they're doing it. It's the way that they're sort of blatantly pushing these players out the door simply because they can make more money and more profit from them, and that should not be what should be happening with academy players in particular, especially ones who've spent their whole lives really at one club and don't want to leave. But are being forced to leave. Now, I'm uncomfortable with the way this is being played out.
Yeah. Miguel, I mean, it feels like there are just constant sort of transfer stories surrounding Chelsea at the moment. In the Daily Express, they've got Chelsea try their luck for Osimhen. This is in regards to Chelsea offering Romelu Lukaku as part of a bid to sign Victor Osimhen from Napoli. We know he's their, superstar striker, but it looks like he's heading out the Napoli exit door this summer. Do you see this one happening? How do you see this going? I mean, again, it's all linked to, fees, wage demands and the money involved.
And let's not forget as well, Chelsea, another club under investigation from historic or alleged historic rule breaking from the Abramovich era. And one of the theories that has been floated around, some of the talk in the Premier League, is that could mean if they're punished, they face a transfer ban or a player registration ban. And that does put, I suppose, if you look at through that prism, it does put a different spin on a lot of this transfer activity. All that said, in terms of this summer, they do need goal scorers. They do need a forward. I mean, there's not that many players in the squad. It was one of the issues Pochettino had last season. There's not many who can put the ball in the back of the net. Osimhen obviously fits that, but they are trying to find all sorts of solutions there, given that Napoli's last contract extension with him, or last contract renegotiation, resulted in getting a huge wage increase, specifically so Napoli could make more money off him because of the extent of the sale. And that is one of the complications now in trying to get this deal done. It does look like it's one of those ones that will eventually be secured late in the window, but with the way it's gone, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea look elsewhere as well. And just picking up on one point there that Jason made about Conor Gallagher as well. I mean, Conor Gallagher is a poster boy for this thing of kind of an academy graduate being sold. This was something else that came up with Richard Masters today, where we did put to him, obviously a lot of these rules are ultimately based on accounting principles, and that's fair enough. But could the Premier League not kind of approach this from another direction and incentivise clubs to keep academy players rather than having to sell them in this way? And Richard Masters' response to that was just supposed to, I suppose, raise exactly what Jason said there and almost give the Premier League spiel about how it has been a good place for youngsters. Now, that is true, but surely it's better if youngsters stay at the club they've grown up with, because even from the perspective of supporters as well, it deepens that identification if you've got players who've come through your own academy.
Yeah. Well, you would have thought so, wouldn't you? There is absolutely loads to talk about. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to look at more of the back pages. This is what the Sun have gone with. Take a little look at the left. They cover a setback for the champions, Manchester City, as Oscar Bobb suffers injury woe ahead of the new season. Hi there, welcome back. You're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back as well to Miguel Delaney, the chief football writer for The Independent, and Jason Burt, chief football correspondent for the Daily Telegraph. Guys, want to start this part by talking to you about that story in The Sun that we teased just before the break. Oscar Bobb with this leg break. Jason, it kind of seems silly to say, is this a huge blow for Manchester City? Because we just know the depth in their squad. But he was so good, if anyone watched the Community Shield on the weekend.
Yeah, I think it is a huge blow, actually, and obviously a real shame for the player, because I think, as you say, when you looked at him at the Community Shield at the weekend, and we've seen glimpses of it in the past last season, he's a highly promising player. He's got a great future ahead of him, and he probably would have got quite a good chance to play at the start of this season, particularly, and probably for the first half of this season, and now it looks like he's going to be ruled out. And I think it is a big setback for Manchester City, who've obviously sold Julian Alvarez for very, very good money, and are probably assessing at the moment whether or not they need to bring somebody in. And I think with this news tonight, I would have thought it's almost certain now they will go back into the transfer market and look for another forward option for them, because they do look a little bit light up front in particular. I think it's one area, despite, obviously, as you say, the fantastically strong squad they've got, they don't have an awful lot of backup for, well, they haven't really got any backup for Haaland, for example. And then some of those wide areas now, I think, if Oscar Bobb is out for a while and obviously Alvarez gone, I think they probably will have to go in and strengthen, especially with the Champions League campaign being more demanding and more fixtures there, and obviously trying to go for a fifth title in a row. So I think it probably is going to be quite a significant story in terms of what it means for Manchester City and for the rest of this transfer window. As I say, I think they probably will make a move now.
Yeah, Miguel, agree with that? Do you think they'll really try and work hard these next couple of weeks to bring someone in?
Yeah, I wonder whether one of the ones they go for is Eze from Crystal Palace, that has been broached early in the summer. And it's been interesting with City actually so far, given that despite the Alvarez sale, there hasn't been that much even murmurings of activity. And one thing on Guardiola in that regard, which I suppose is relevant to Oscar's future as well, is that for all of Guardiola's financial advantages at each of the clubs he's been within that, at Barcelona and Bayern as well, and City obviously with Phil Foden, he has been very willing to give young players their chance if he feels they're ready. And so from that perspective, it is very disappointing news for the player and the team.
Yeah. Right, we just want to move on to a couple of stories in the Star, starting with Arne Slot. The headline here says, "Keep calm, ditch the chaos, but carry on winning," says Slot. Jason, I mean, I suppose the big story around, we keep talking about sort of the transfer window, the big story around Liverpool is that they haven't made any signings. They obviously sort of revitalised their midfield last summer, didn't they? And people maybe assumed there'd be maybe a similar sort of, activity this summer with a new manager coming in. What have you made of it?
I think there was always going to be some key targets that they were going to go for this summer, and they have shown their hand a little bit. We obviously know they were in for Lenny Yoro, a centre half that Manchester United bought. Zubimendi, as you say, who decided to stay in Spain and not join them. So they're looking for that number 6. So looking for a centre half, and obviously we also knew there was some interest in Anthony Gordon. So they have shown their hand a little bit in terms of their transfer targets, but I don't think they need to do an awful lot. If you remember last season, we were talking about how they were in a very strong position with this squad developing, with young players coming through, with players such as Harvey Elliott, who's obviously, I think, expected to have quite a big season for Liverpool. In many ways, the bigger concern for them is just tying down those sort of 3 key players to new contracts or deciding their futures in Virgil van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Mohamed Salah. I think that's been slightly forgotten a little bit in this kind of expectation they're going to actually go into the transfer market. But I think things are fairly calm there. I think they will buy a defensive midfield. I think they have to. And obviously, it's a huge blow for Zubimendi not to come. But I don't think there's any sense of panic around the place. I don't think they needed to do an awful lot in this window. But I think they will definitely try and bring in somebody, because that's one area of the pitch where they need to improve.
Yeah. Miguel, just lastly then, Jason saying there when he's talking about Liverpool, surprised the fact they haven't tied down these key players yet. Manchester United are a club who have done that, because they've done that with Bruno Fernandes. It feels like another statement of intent really from Ineos, because they're building this project and key players are staying as well.
Yeah, I mean, and it had been, I suppose, mooted earlier in the summer that they would seek an overhaul of the squad with very few players who weren't at least available for sale. But Bruno Fernandes was always going to be one of them, just for his influence on the club over the past few years. And there is a very strong argument that he's maybe the most successful and one of the few truly successful purchases in the post-Alex Ferguson era. And in that, he's kind of become someone that I suppose fans and the club can identify with and identify around. So he has become very important. And again, we saw maybe most recently the direct football influence, that beautiful pass in the cup final for Kobbie Mainoo's goal.
Yeah. Guys, brilliant to speak to you this evening. Always so good to get your thoughts and get your insight. No doubt you'll be on the show plenty more this season, talking about VAR as well. Thank you so much. And we'll speak to you again soon. A little reminder for you at home, if you missed any of the show, there is another chance to see Back Pages tonight, hour. And the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join us again on Thursday night as well, when our guests will be John Cross from The Mirror and Jonathan Liu from The Guardian.